Everyone. Is Deborah here?
No, I don't think she is.
She's coming back.
Okay. I'm going to call the meeting to order. She's probably on a call. She'll be right back. Okay. Oh. Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. I would like to start off in, Ms. Vesalotis is not with us tonight. She's been feeling ill. They had an incredible HR meeting this morning with a large agenda, and she made it through that, and she texted us and she said, I got to get over this, and so she's not feeling well. And for those who sat on the HR committee with her this morning, please stay away from me. Please just stay away. Let's see, that brings us to our request for budget adjustments, and I will call on the clerk, Mr. Drake.
We have two routine applications, PS1 and parking services for $2,873,150, which is a release of conditions. And the second one is ED9 from the Board of Education, $682,503, which is an appropriation for flood damage.
Moved by our clerk and seconded by Ms. Tarkington. Mr. Raymer, I'd like to recognize you for a motion.
Thank you. Would the committees who considered this matter kindly do committee reports, including their votes?
So I have a request from Mr. Raymer, which is a motion to add the committee reports to the routine applications. Do I have a second? Second. Seconded by Ms. Moriarty. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstaining? That is carried. I would give Ms. Tarkington a chance to, are you ready?
Sure.
And you can pick whatever one you'd like to go first if you want.
So I'll start with the parking services, the release of conditions. The subject to release request was made to fulfill the Board of Estimate and Taxation's condition in the current budget of the review and acceptance of a semi-annual report by Deputy Police Chief Marino. The Deputy Chief, Mark Marino, reported on operations, provided updates on operational projects, personnel and finances, and capital, including open items and encumbrances. The committee voted 4-0-0 to approve the release of conditions and recommend the application to the full BET as a routine application.
Thank you.
And the second one, ED9, for the BOE, the Director of Facilities, Dan Watson, described the water damage experienced at GHS due to the rupture of a failed flexible connection in the piping for the heating system that allowed water to flow under the wood floor of the gymnasium and saturate the floor covering in the Performing Arts Center lobby and the ramps in the PAC. Chief Operating Officer Sean O'Keefe enumerated expenses of $341,000 for the response and remediation of the failed connection. An additional $342,000 is being accelerated from the proposed fiscal year 2020-2021 budget to replace all similar flexible connections in the heating system. Questions were asked about the increased cost of the full remediation from $250,000 as originally proposed in this upcoming budget. Superintendent of Schools, Tony Jones, also attended the Budget Committee meeting. The committee voted 4-0-0 to approve the request for the $682,000 appropriation. The Budget Committee recommended the application as a routine application.
Thank you. Okay, with that, can I all those in favor of our routine application signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Those have carried 11-0-0. That brings us to, we have no non-routine applications, and I'll just comment on non-routine applications. Our process for years has always been routine applications are an indication that they've been through our committees. They're likely to be approved. The department heads or the sponsors need not be here to answer questions. We feel we're comfortable enough to handle the item. A non-routine item, that is a signal to the department heads where we may have more questions or need more information. We're undecided, and that would be an indication for them. Mr. Raymer's motion, which I think is adequate for his goal, and I think it's a worthwhile goal, and the Policy Procedure Committee will probably have a cup of coffee and talk about this, but I think the idea is there's just things that we do as a full board that might be missed on the committee level, so I think he's trying to enhance the transparency for the public, and I understand that, so we'll see how we go in the future working on that, so I just wanted to mention that. Which that brings us to the assessor's report. Good evening.
Good evening. Mr. Chairman and fellow members of the BET, I'd like to present the assessor's report for February 2020. Now that the grand list, 2019 grand list has been completed, it's been signed. The deadline for the Board of Assessment Appeals was February 20th. On my report, I reported 198 appeals to the Board of Assessment Appeals. After a closer look at that, we actually ended up with 254 appeals this year. There are 212 residential appeals, 23 commercial, and 19 personal property. And to give you some perspective on how we have done in prior years, last year we had a total of 187 appeals for the grand list of 2018. Grand list of 2017, we had 244. And in 2016 grand list, we had 227. So this year I have also increased, as you can see on my calculations, the Board of Assessment Appeals, I've estimated the reduction to the grand list at roughly $85 million. Last year, they reduced the grand list by about $69 million. Other than that, does anybody have questions for me this evening?
Mr. Raymer.
A couple of things. So earlier on, you were estimating that we would be working with a grand list at 0.9% higher than the previous grand list. Are you changing that figure?
No.
Second question, unrelated to the first. May I please refer you to page 3, at the top of page 3, where you're showing what the application level is, I should say, for the senior tax relief. I'm recalling, of course, that the regulations were changed about a year ago, and that this is the first round of tax payment on the new regulations, correct?
Right. So what I did to better estimate, because ultimately what we did is we changed the amount of benefits, we've actually increased it for some. And it wasn't quite sure because we have, instead of 3 grades, we've now created it more. Now, if you look there on the last page, I have the senior stratifications as to the benefits. So what I did is I took all the applicants from last year from 2018, on our 2018 grant list. I plugged them in as though this ordinance was in place last year. That increased our local option from giving credits from $760,000 to $902,000.
And that's just a projection,
It's
correct?
just a projection. This is just based upon last year's applicants and the current new ordinance rate of benefit.
So I'm going to point something out to my colleagues and also to Roland, although I suspect Roland is way ahead of me on this. We don't budget, that's the wrong expression. In our budget, we have a mill rate calculation, and the mill rate calculation makes an assumption of what are going to be the allowance for senior tax relief. For years, it was at $950, and for years, we were actually, in fact, spending $780, $760, $820, numbers of that order of magnitude. And last year, and also for the upcoming year, we're showing in the current projection an allowance of $900,000. And I'm going to suggest that when we do finalize the budget, we should be revising that figure to another figure that makes some allowance with a question mark at the end of this sentence. Would you be suggesting we make it 925, 950? What would you be suggesting might be a reasonable but conservative, meaning careful to be sure we allow enough in our calculation?
I would suggest a rough $950,000 because I think in the income limit has gone up as well as the number of applicant and the request for applications that we've gotten this year too. So
Okay.
I think 950,000 should be an accurate.
Thank
good
you.
estimate.
I have nothing else, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Tarkington, followed by Ms. Crumack.
On the same point, are you apt to have new applicants? I mean, what I just heard from you is that's an increase of 19% just on exactly the same, people who have registered.
Right.
So is the amount that you've just advised, Mr. Raymer, will that be sufficient, given this 19, almost 20% increase in just same people year over year?
So what happens, unfortunately, is we also lose some. Some pass away or some move out. So there's it's an ongoing kind of ebb and flow. We increased the income limit this year. Plus, we also lost unfortunately, there's always some seniors that pass away or move on or move out of their home, so they no longer need it. So there's a lot of turnover in the senior program. Usually, if you've noticed over the last few years, we've been losing seniors. It's been going down. So I think even though we have a bit more applicants coming in, I would imagine that a lot of them are at that lower level. In other words, they're only going to get the $600 grant, not the $2,500 grant benefit. So I think we're fine.
Can I just ask a follow-up?
Yeah.
But we also added a people with disabilities program to this too. Are you including that as you calculate? And, do you have any feel for how many additional applicants you might get because of that program?
So the disabled who are actually so we have an exemption for disabled people that automatically take a $1,000 exemption off their real estate. We only have 22 of them. Number one. Number two is some of those do, because some of them would have qualified for the state program, and they don't. Their incomes are too high. So we will not get a lot of additional applicants because of that, I don't believe.
Thank you.
Ms. Crumack.
That was my question as well. I just wanted to know how the disabled would fit in.
I know we're going to get a couple because that's why we added it and it was amended, because there were a couple of people applicants that this was a concern about, because they did get the state program, but they didn't get the local option. Now that we have the local option in place for them, we'll get a couple more, but I don't foresee us getting a great number of them.
On the dead, we keep them on the tax roll until.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Okay. After November next year. Any other questions?
One quick thing, rare for page 6. There's 2 charts. And one of my colleagues who knows exactly every inch of this chart and what it means and everything pointed this out. So I'll ask you, what is that curve tailing off on that bottom chart, which is the average, if I could read, average?
Yep. That's the sale price this chart shows the comparison of our assessments to the sale price. What happens as we have gone farther away from the revaluation date, number one, is that my statistics start to spread out. So in other words, I have ratios that vary both on the low end and on the high end. What this is saying is that now my midpoint has slowly been, the median sale price has slowly been decreasing, and in January was not a great month for sales in the town of Greenwich. We're at 1. So basically that means that I have the same amount of assessments that are sales that reflects fair market value that are higher, and the same amount that are lower.
So spin this forward a year, we've had a reval.
I don't know. I'm going to qualify this. When we do the reval, I have to watch carefully. What's going to be quite interesting is that over the last couple of years, we've seen some moderate increases in sale prices over town-wide. We are now seeing a divergence of sale prices in the backcountry and elsewhere in Greenwich. January is never a great month for sales to begin with. What will be telling to determine the 2020 reval, I think, is what happens this spring and what happens this summer, as to determine where our assessments are going to go based upon sale prices. If this is any indication, it means that our grand list may not go up that much.
Ms. Moriarty?
Just as a follow-up, thinking about the discussion that we had with you at the Budget Committee just 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
You presented charts by district, looking at the rates of sales experience versus the assessment. You really only identified 2 districts that were significantly out of the expectation. And at that meeting, you gave us a little bit more comfort not to expect wide swings in valuations.
I'm not expecting wide springs. It's just a matter of whether the increase in, the decrease in what we see are in districts 10 and 11, do we have enough increases in other areas to combat that? And on the commercial side as well? That's the $64,000 question. Yes, so we'll see. I think so. I think we'll see. Do remember, not only will we have the change in value based upon doing the revaluation, we will always have an increase in value based upon building permits and new construction. We'll always, I think we had 300 million plus this year. We will now granted, we vary on that depending upon the building that's going on. We will always get increases based upon new construction. That's embedded in your increase on your grand list from year to year. The difference now is how much more, will I get more appreciation? Will assessments go up a bit more because of the difference between the valuation in October 1st, 2015 versus the valuation as of October 1st, 2020?
Mr. Raymer?
I mean, just to put a little nicer spin on it. I just want to leave something, even at this chart, even without the refined data that you shared with the Budget Committee during the budget hearings 10 days ago, even at this chart, there is no month, including this grim January that we're looking at, in which properties at the median are selling for less than what they were assessed for in the 2015. And on the average, of course, it's somewhat higher.
Right.
So, averages and medians can be deceptive, but what this is reflecting to you is that if this is how it looks through the spring and summer, you'll be looking at a grand list that is essentially flat with the grand list as it was 5 years before. Not flat for all neighborhoods.
Right. It will
not
just
flat
be-
for all houses,
It'll be a
but flat
shift.
in the
Right,
overall.
Right, exactly.
Can I get a motion to accept the assessor's report? Moved by Ms. Tarkin, seconded by Mr. Raymer. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? 11-0. Thank you very much. Moving on, Controller's report.
Good evening, BET members. A couple comments just on the first topic, the annual budget process, and then I'll open it to questions. I'm not sure if it's been communicated, but working with the HR department, we got a switch for Tuesday, tomorrow, and Thursday. We have this room, and I don't know if that was communicated for both days. They took the Cone room, and we got the town hall room. And just sticking with the budget process, this is the busiest time of the year. January, February, and March, we're about halfway through, and I'd like to personally thank Roland Geiger and Angela Giancarelli for all the work. I know you all appreciated it, but halfway there.
And Kathy, too. She gets a lot of minutes in this time.
All right, and then Elaine Brown.
And Elaine.
All right, I'll just open it to any other questions in the controller's report.
Wow. Can I get a motion to accept the Controller's report? Moved by Ms. Tarkenton, seconded by Ms. Moriarty. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? Thank you. Treasurer's report. Does any member have any questions, comments? Can I get a motion to accept the treasurer's report? Moved by Ms. Tarkington. Seconded by Mr. Raymer.
Mr. Mason?
Discussion, Ms. Crumick?
I just was wondering, I thought we were going to not have votes on the treasurer's report, given the line of discussions we've had leading,
No, the
Leading
question that's come up on the, and you're going
that we're
to,
not liable as a board for numbers we're not preparing.
I think, I think we've had a lot of detailed conversation on this, and I think we're liable by not following the town charter and our own rules, where it's specifically carved out that the BET shall review the treasurer's report monthly. The question that I think you're referring to is the latest revision in Robert's rules, where the word accept is to opine on approve. And that is a difficult conversation, by the way. And I assure you that the Policy Procedure Committee will. However, I can tell you that in doing the research on this, the BET has, other than in the last term, accepted the treasurer's report, because the thing you have to look at, if we were to go back in time to where the chair would recognize that we've received the treasurer's report, where would you as a finance board member have the opportunity and/or the public to question it? You wouldn't. It would be received by and you would have to actually make a motion to put it on the agenda for discussion to bring up a point. So it is a challenge. It's not a challenge I enjoy. I just think that we have an obligation by charter, and it's in there 4 different ways, that we are responsible to review these. And I think to accept is one word, and I think review is a different word. And I think I just want to make sure that every member here, and I would entertain motion if a member wanted to postpone while they were researching something, or if they had a question or a correction. But I understand your point, and I think we're obligated by our rules and our charter to review, and I think the word receive is not review. So that's the position I've taken, and I promised in my email that with the Policy and Procedure Committee, we'd have to take a look at this, but it's the past practice, and I look at it as our authority. Further discussion?
Mr. Mason?
Yes.
May we ask the town attorney to please look at this and provide an opinion on this? Because I think it's important enough for any finance board to ensure that we're doing it properly.
I will suggest that the Chair of the Law Committee, who's not here tonight, to take a look at this, if that would make you happy. Further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstaining?
I'm abstaining.
So I have 10-0-1. I keep forgetting about the 11. Okay. Okay, moving on. Let me just get caught up here. BET Standing Committee reports. I did not have any sent in. As you know, though, if you have one and you didn't get it in, you just flag me down, raise my attention. Liaison reports, we have 2. Information technology is the first.
Hi. So we wrapped up last term's IT liaison position, Tony Turner and myself, and Laura Erickson and myself, the new co-liaisons, are working with risk management and IT across the town. And we are on our endless road of making great progress with respect to our cyber program. So working hard on it. And Laura, is there anything you'd like to add? Thank you.
No, I really appreciate that. There was a gentleman from the media outside from our last audit committee and giving me a hard time. What are they doing in there? And I also want to say that in listening to the budget committee deliberations, I expect there might be some budget modifications coming from us in that, working down that road. So I think that's all positive. And I definitely want to thank you, Laura, for catching up real quick and taking over. So thank you.
Absolutely. She's a very quick learner.
Education. What a mistake I made becoming a liaison to the education. No, I'm sorry. I'm teasing. Tonight, with help from Ms. Moriarty, you have 3 handouts. 2 of them were in your package and 1 of them was not. And by the way, there has been so much conversation about capital projects and the process. So I was fortunate enough to attend my first liaison meeting for New Left School, and the architect was there and took the Board of Ed through one of the charts that you have there, the biggest one you have, and explained the process. That same architect has done what project for us, Ms. Moriarty? Glenville?
The high school science.
Oh, high school science, one of the early capital projects. And if you look at that chart, and this is just something I wanted the BET members to have, especially when we go out into the RTM districts, the bottom chart, which would be Schedule B, is a probable example for us on New Leb School. We're probably going to finish up A&E this year. Next year, we'll bid the job, and then you'll see the process. But if you look at the hurdles that it takes, it's incredible. Then we have another project, possible project in town for 1327 King Street, which is the town possibly allowing GEMS to build a facility there. Budget Committee's been talking about this, but so Al Manelli was kind enough, working with Tracy Seutinger from GEMS, to send sort of what I know about the property, what I think you're going to have to do, what the steps are going to be, and a calendar. And that's this one right here with the colored chart. And again, you could see how far this goes out to accomplish this. And I think the most interesting thing I read on that was if you go on that, is it that report? If you go to what would be the fourth page in that report, and the top of it says, GEMS Station 4 Project Outline. And this is just an informational document, it's not binding, but it says here, if you look at number 5, filing applications for both P&Z Municipal Improvement and P&Z Preliminary Site Plan, these applications will require a minimum A2 survey, stormwater management report, detailed building floor plan and elevations as part of these applications. Inland wetland approval is required. This effort is approximately 30% of the total design package of the project. So we've all had these conversations through how much of the A&E do you need to kind of get what we call through the land use process. That's where this is coming from. This is just pure experience on the town. And this was said to us last year. Ms. Moriarty, you were chair of the Budget Committee, and Mr. Manelli had given us sort of a run through this, and I after all these years, my jaw dropped. So that's your handout number 2. Handout number 3 is actually right from P&Z as a checklist, for these projects. And I think the point I'm trying to make is that we as a board, we see all the capital requests. The Board of Ed has a pretty long list for a decade plus, and we see some new initiatives coming. What is our typical challenge? Our typical challenge is anticipate when these projects could realistically happen, what the cash flows might be, et cetera. I thought this information was a good starting point. We've also included in your package the minutes from the feasibility study meeting with them. And there's another project going on that we've attended the meeting, and the same thing, Greenwich High School 1A, Security Enhancement Project. We attended that meeting too. So besides all of, I want to just say Ms. Moriarty's Budget Committee meetings, we're doing all of these meetings too. And I just, it's amazing. It's one after another. But I just think it's important for us to be able to explain to the people that we're dealing with and why we're thinking what we're thinking, the ability to do all the projects, the cash flow, the timeline. I just don't think we've ever had this. I've never had anything like this detailed. I mean, Bill Drake served on a building committee. Leslie have served on, Karen is on Eastern Greenwich Civic Center. And even Karen said to me, and she's not here tonight, she even said to me, she goes, that's exactly how many meetings we had to go to with the user groups at Eastern Greenwich Civic Center. I mean, several meetings talking about usage and everything. So it's a complicated process. So I thought it was worthwhile to share that tonight. So I probably couldn't answer any questions, but I thought it was just valuable information for us to kind of have. I see Mr. Raymer studying there. Whoa. Ms. Tarkington?
I'm sorry, did you say the one on the GEMS, the 1327 King Street, was prepared by Mr. Manelli, or was it prepared by GEMS?
It was, if I understand it correctly, GEMS had talked to Al Manelli, and Al said, look, I don't know if I'm going to be able to take on that project for you, but he gave them some homework and some things to start focusing on.
Thank you.
Now the best question. Ms. Moriarty, did I mess anything up on that? Did I get that accurate?
Yes, I don't recall the source of this GEMS chart, whether that was Al's or GEMS.
Yeah, I don't either.
That's a minor point, but the process of construction in this town is difficult when you talk about public construction and the involvement of user groups and committees, and all the approval steps required. It makes it a complicated process.
So, okay, thank you, thank you. Special project teams, Mr. Drake, New Lab.
The new lab report is very brief. The building is up. It's been, had students in it for over a year. And the new lab school, the playgrounds are done, the parking is done, the field is seeded and growing. We're not running around on it yet, but we will be probably in April. And we've received the 17 million in reimbursements as it is noted in the controller's report, and we have 11% retainage yet to go, and we think when we're done with all this, we'll be under budget.
On time and a beautiful building.
Yes. Can somebody, or Mr. Drake, can you explain the 11% retainage? What is that?
We periodically submit our approved costs, which is roughly 64% of costs, and we get paid those amounts, but on every payment, an 11% is retained. So what we have left to claim and receive is 11%, plus I think one tiny more application. So we've made, go ahead, Pete.
The retainage is governed by the state statutes. And if you go to the back of the controller's report, you can see there's different amounts from different periods. Ham Ave is different than the Glenville School is different than New Lebanon. The purpose of retainage is they hold it back until you're audited, so that when they go through, I think they usually do desktop audits. If they determine some of the eligible costs are ineligible, you won't get the whole 11%. So that's the purpose of retaining the retainage.
And how do we budget that? When it comes in, we just
Okay.
Log it as a
There's-
revenue?
Again, I'll go to the last page of the controller's report. Hamilton Avenue was paid for with the mill rate, with taxes, and there's about 300,000 that's retained. I can't remember exactly the amount. Or no, it was one something, I think. And after that's audited, and it's cleared, we'll get that money back. They withhold it when they completely audit the program. Same thing with the Glenville. As far as to answer your question, that money for Ham Ave goes straight into the general fund, and the other two is basically, it's offset against the borrowing. Okay. So in other words, if you had a $10 million project and $1 million of it was reimbursements, you could only bond $9 million, and then say 900,000 is received and 100 is retained. So it makes you, that's why we can't close out some of these old projects with the authorized on issued that shows up in the CAFR, and et cetera. So that's the way it works as far as the retainage.
got it.
Mr. Mason's question was, how is it budgeted? And the fact of the matter is, you don't put it into revenues at all, do you?
No, it's not.
No.
Hamilton Avenue has been done for 2009 or something like that. I wouldn't know what year to budget it in.
Ms. Harrison?
Yeah, a question for Bill, if that's okay. When do you expect the building committee to wrap up its work? And at what point do you think you'll produce one of those lessons learned documents? Because I think there's a lot of good things that, based on my experience in serving on 2 building committees, the differences were pretty stark to me. So I think we should share that knowledge.
That's an excellent idea, and yes, we are thinking of that, and don't hold me to it, but within 90 days is our goal to both wrap up and conclude the lessons learned.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you. Brings us to old business. So during the budget deliberations, you started getting hundreds of emails from Elaine. The town has a new system for scheduling meeting rooms. This conversation is leading to about 3 different items. The first thing is anybody can request a town hall meeting room now as far as 3 years in advance. So you see tomorrow, we're back in here, and that's because Elaine says it is now a computer and it's not personal where I can go to the person who used to run it and say, hey, look, this is BET, they have to be on TV. Interviewing police officers doesn't have to be, can we switch? It's just a technical system. She goes to an app and loads in meeting room. So with that, I've asked Elaine to take our generic schedule for our meeting, budget, HR, audit. No, law is always separate. Maybe it's investments. Maybe that's the last one. And to start framing out a calendar, and we're probably going to have this before us within a month. It's already in draft. So we can start reserving meetings as early as we can for at least next year so we get rooms that we want, which leads us to another request, which is for instance, our budget committee meetings that have to do with the budget. So what I'm going to do, and we have an advantage, is that the budget committee members who are there right now will be there next year, so they can start framing it out. I know they're busy with the final day of meetings and consolidation and decision, but right after that, if they could work towards grabbing these rooms, because it's a very complicated process. So that's why you're doing it. The next phase of this, instead of Elaine sending out all the emails to all of us where you accept or decline whatever or say maybe, and then she gets all the responses. So for all those emails she sent us, every time you plugged one in your thing, she got an email back. And she was like, whoa, okay. So what we're thinking of doing, the next phase, is if you were to take your iPhone and go to your calendar, you can look at calendars on the bottom and you can add a calendar. So what we're thinking of doing is getting us to add a calendar, which will be Elaine's calendar. So it's one central calendar. So you'll just, when you select will be phase 2, where we're starting to experiment with this right now. When you go to phase 2, you'll just be looking at Elaine's calendar and you'll know the budget committee is 5 o'clock on Tuesday the 7th or whatever it is. So it's been kind of tricky, and for some of us who loaded up our calendar in advance, like I did till July, so I have double everything. So it's okay. So that's phase 2, and that just brings us into, it'll be a lot easier. They can roll that into the town, and so it's been a complicated process, but it all started, and we're in the middle of budget committee meetings, and I see everybody reaching for their phone and doing this, and I'm like, oh, they don't know what's going on, and I felt bad, but so I just figured I needed to explain where we are and what the next step was. Mr. Deuce?
Didn't Elaine make a change 3 weeks ago that on our calendar, we already have downloaded all the meetings and times and locations? So what is changing then?
Well, before, you loaded your own calendar.
Yes.
Now Elaine's sending you an appointment, and you're accepting, declining, or saying maybe.
But what I'm hearing is we could ignore that query.
Well, the next phase is that
Okay.
what we're going to try to, and we're staying with it right now, but what we're going to try to do is just have you add a calendar to your phone. It'll just be all populated. And it won't have Elaine having to take her car in for an oil change or any of that. It'll just be BET stuff. And by the way, that will actually help us, because I'm thinking, and I'm asking you, what do you want on our calendar? Do you want RTM meetings? Right? Do you want district and committee meetings? That we can go as far as we want. So I don't consider myself the IT person by a long stretch, but we're making progress. So it's how far we want to go with this. So there's some room for creative ideas. Mr. Vice President?
So the only question is the integration of Elaine's calendar with our own personal calendars. This is an IT question I'm asking you, which is really crazy. But we should take it offline, I'm sure. But is there a way to do that? Or
Yes.
There is?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Yes.
All right. Okay.
That was one of the things I tried and botched up my calendar and had to rebuild it for the 3rd time. So as I've said, when I was working on this during the budget, if there's a meeting that we have and I'm not here, that's what happened.
How do you do that?
I had the wrong appointment in. So again, just progress, but I would ask all of the committees, you can get through the budget, but start thinking about, do we want to frame out, next year? And I don't know what the holidays are, and I don't know what the school vacation schedules are or any of that stuff, so. Okay, new business. Yes,
Not to get too far in the weeds here, but is there a policy is there a prioritization process? Are we going to be competing with, is it first come, first served?
that is the best question, because there never was. It was always first come, first serve. And we were continually fighting to get this room. You know how much fun it is for us when we're in the cone room, right? We're like this, and it's just not comfortable. It was first come, first serve, and when it was operated by a person, Elaine was able to go down there from time to time and kind of help us get back into, say, this room. That's gone. It's now mechanical, so there is no priority. It's just who signs it up first. So and by the way, that's run by purchasing, believe it or not. Purchasing runs that, correct? I think they own that.
They always did.
Yeah, so.
Well, of course, purchasing has a budget.
Oh, see that? See that? He said that. I didn't say that. We'll be on that tomorrow. New business, cash management resolution. I think that's Mr. Deuce.
Yes. You may recall about a year ago, the BET approved a resolution that allowed the treasurer, subject to approvals, to make investments in bank CDs, and the program was approved for up to $20 million. And it's been very successful. We've done very well over the last year, but then we realized that as these CDs mature, we're rolling over accrued or realized interest into new principal. And the balance has grown to about 21 and change. And so I think that requires perhaps that we amend the resolution from a year ago to, instead of saying the limit that we can invest in CDs is 20 million, to increase the limit to perhaps say 25 million. Again, we're not putting any new money into it. We're just rolling over the earnings that we've realized in the program to date. And that would require approval by this board.
So if I can ask a question before I open it up. So the handout that we have in our package, in the box where it says deleted 20 and it's inserted 25, that's the only revision to the policy you're asking for?
Yeah, I couldn't expand upon that. That's all we're seeking. Yes.
That's it?
Yes.
Discussion? Mr. Raymer?
So sorry to be so arcane, but two very minor typos that do not affect the content of anything before you. If I can just bring them to your attention. On the first page, in the third further resolve clause, it reads, further resolve that the treasurer may, with the approval of the controller, invest, take out the word up, may invest in certificates of deposit. Up doesn't belong. Over on the second page, right in the middle of the page, it's sort of the second further resolve clause. It reads, further resolve that the treasurer may, with the approval of the controller, use the following security broker dealers. Delete the word with is an inappropriate word. These, as I said, they're unimportant changes, but while we're doing it, maybe we should just clean up those errors. I have nothing else, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Raymer, can I ask the body to accept those two changes without any second look, or?
Yeah, I mean, they're completely minor changes. I think could have been handled informally. I just thought, since you're voting something, if it, I mean, handle it any way you want, Mr. Chairman, but I just thought they could just go vote the three changes, the substitution of the 25 and the deletion of those two words.
I'll second them if you need a second.
Okay, okay.
We need a second on the 25 for sure.
Right.
Okay.
A second Jeff's too.
Okay.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? That is carried. New business, Blum Shapiro Internal Audit Services. Mr. Drake.
The audit committee in the prior term had done essentially all the work to set up and invite Blum Shapiro to propose the 5 audits that are in this letter and to agree on the price and the sequences and the terms. And with the few comments by the audit committee members in this new term, we recommend to you by a vote of 4-0 that the BET approve this letter, which fits within the consulting monies that the BET has, and really takes the place of our internal auditor, whom we don't have. So we would offer this for the BET's approval.
Okay, the item's been moved by Mr. It's actually coming from a committee. Discussion on the item? Ms. Moriarty?
I just wanted to ask a clarifying question. I don't intend to have the answer to this change the letter, but this goes to the controller, if I can ask that through the chair. On what the current intent is, I know that you are looking for a new internal auditor for the town as an employee. Are you intending that, at this point, that Bloom Shapiro will most likely complete all 5 of these audits? Or do you expect that some of these assignments will be taken on by a new internal auditor when they're on board, and that Bloom will, scope of work will be less than this?
To answer your question, we're hiring Bloom to do these 5 audits. Their charge is to finish the 5 audits. Hopefully, if we can get an internal auditor in before the 5 are finished, they would be part of the process. They would help facilitate it, and then we go through, help through the learning curve. I don't know, it's very difficult to find an experienced municipal internal auditor, and if they come from the corporate world, this would be great, valuable education for them. But to answer your question, and if I could, just a correction to Mr. Drake's statements, they're going to finish all 5, but it's not coming from the BET's consultant monies. It's coming from the surplus in the salaries based on the internal auditor not being employed since last July, and 2 other positions creates over $100,000 surplus. And it comes from a different line. It comes from the auditor's line, 141, as opposed to the consultant line of 51490. Did I answer that? Yeah.
Thanks for making the correction.
Just one follow-up. So and this is within your discretion, I'm just interested, you expect to do these then sequentially, that not have Bloom work all 5 at once starting tomorrow, but to space them out throughout the year?
The plan is to do them sequentially, but I had a conversation with Jeff Ziplo, who's the lead partner on this. There'll be an overlap so that there's not a gap of a month or so. For example, let's say that they complete the first assignment at the end of, say, March, just to pick dates. We're not going to wait until they go through the process of reporting to the audit committee. There'll be overlap on each one of these. So I don't know if that's considered sequential, but there'll be overlap on that, on the 5 of them.
You okay?
Yeah.
Mr. Washburn?
I do think, and we discussed this at the audit committee, and I'm perfectly fine with the letter and the discussion so far. However, the 3rd item, the transfer station revenue, insofar as there is considerable change and potentially a different direction in terms of how Holly Hill may function, it would be smart on our part to review the scope of that audit. That is to say, for the audit committee to review the scope of that audit before we engage Blum Shapiro to, go forward. So at the last audit committee, I raised some questions. They may not be the right questions, but to get the 4 of us that are on the audit committee to really rethink this a little bit, because, this scope was written, I think, a year ago sometime. And so while some of the points in the scope may be applicable, some of them may not be as applicable. Anyway, it seems to me it warrants a discussion before we get them really rolling on that third item. And that's a question for you, Pete, is to make sure you're okay with that too.
I don't know if I misheard that. Do you want to delay the hiring of them?
No. Oh, no.
Okay.
No, I'm a yes vote on the letter and a yes vote on the hiring of them. No, that was clear.
Okay.
I'm just saying that on page, 2 of the letter, we delineate in 8 or so bullets the transfer station revenue audit. I'm just saying that we need to have, we may want to consider having some flexibility as to the specifics around the scope of that particular audit. That's all I'm saying.
Right, okay.
Through the chair to Mr. Drake.
Yes, please.
To answer the question is what I would prefer to do is, we're not going to get to the third assignment by the next audit committee meeting. So what I would do is proceed, start the hiring. Plan was to start with the school lunch the first week of March. But for the audit committee, this is through the chair to Mr. Drake, amend the scope of the third one. And if it requires additional sums, I can come back to the audit committee could recommend to the BET and come back in March, if that's doable.
That seems fine with me. Sure, that this is a topic that's open in town, and so it's common sense to
That's all.
think about it.
Mr. Mason? Oh. I think David brings up a good point, and it may not just be change in scope. It might just also be change in timing, where maybe you have to push this one out and give it some time to flush through it, as they work through it. But I think it's a very good point, so thank you.
Question I have. This is the contract amendable that we are about to end. In other words, can you tell them to hold off? My actual thought was actually 180 degrees different than what I'm hearing from Mr. Weisbrot. My thought is maybe we want to do an audit to know where we are today before there's any potential change which the Board of Selectmen and the RTM might make.
To answer your question, you mean amendable, meaning it's flexible.
Right.
Okay, the third audit, the transportation audit, was taken out of order and moved up. What we can do is, we're going to start the school lunch as far as 2, 3, 4, and 5. They're adjustable as long as I tell the auditors. The answer is yes. You could change the order. Now, I think I just heard where you want it pushed back and you want it moved forward at the same time.
Well,
We're stretching like a rubber band.
I mean, we have an agreement in here we're about to vote on, and if we're.
The answer is yes.
Why would
It's-
we
it's-
vote on an agreement
if-
where the transfer station audit is not what some people want? There's a look for something, a change. I'm not against or for the change. My point is, I don't know the timing for any potential changes that might come out of the Board of Selectmen and the RTM as far as fees or how we operate the transfer station or whatever we're doing. I almost like to know exactly where we are first before we make the change. I'm
Okay.
a little bit backwards, but.
Same request to the chair, is this, to the audit chair, we'll discuss it as far as the scope and the timing on the same
So are
audit.
you recommending a motion to postpone this for a month?
No, I'm not.
Okay, so do I have a motion to amend item 3 to change the scope?
Not at the audit committee.
Mr. Weisbrot, followed by Ms. Erickson.
So, no, I didn't mean to open up that kind of hornet's nest. It's my understanding that although it's delineated bullet by bullet as to what the scope is, my understanding, and Mr. Minarski can correct me if I'm wrong, is that there is a level of flexibility, practicality in the nature of the relationship with Blum Shapiro, so that if at the next audit committee or prior to that, if Mr. Drake wants to convene us all, we wish to alter either the timing or I was thinking more the scope itself, that would be acceptable to Blum Shapiro, with potentially with a change in the fee if we engage more of their time, but that even though we know that there may be changes here, or it doesn't detract from the need for us to sign the letter and go forward because of the inherent flexibility that Blum Shapiro would, have in engaging with us. Am I right in that?
No, you're correct, yes.
Thank you.
Ms. Erickson, I'm sorry.
I think the nature of the beast is an audit does look retrospectively at where you are. And I think that was part of the rationale for the audit committee moving this item up from number 5 to number 3, given that there may be some changes, substantive changes perhaps at the Holly Hills transfer station. Let's see where we are. So the other thing is once we get the school lunch fund and student activity audits back in draft form or formal formally accept them, we'll know. We'll have a better sense of the deliverable, the work product, and I'm sure that Pete, as we decide we want to learn more information, we can work with Blum Shapiro to adjust the scope. But I'm totally in favor of the letter. Let's move on this so we can get started. We've been without an internal audit function for too long.
Ms. Hess?
Yeah, I echo that. I'm in support of approving this. I am comfortable with the flexibility built into the contract. Having done this professionally before, that there's abilities to modify, but we should be starting this because we have had a gap for many months now, and I think it's important to get started. So I'm voting in support of moving forward on this tonight. Thank you.
Okay, so before I call for a vote, I just want to be very clear. This document, if approved by the BET, the scope as depicted on, well, the pages aren't, on page 2 for the transfer station, that scope is what we're approving. Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstaining? That item is carried. Thank you. Wow, moving on. Chair's report. I try to not do too much on the chair's report, but I always like to highlight some of the things that come my way. I think you all know I'm pretty inclusive, sharing everything. TAG, Transportation Association of Greenwich, had their first fundraiser. They had a go-kart event at that new facility in Stanford, and they had a tremendous, successful night. Very good. They have another one, I think we're on the invite list, coming up in March, which is, I think they do a sort of a casino night. It's a fun night. It's, I haven't attended before. The work from everybody on this BET, I can't tell you how important it is to me and how much I thank you. I want 12 BET members, no matter where we go, to have answers, information, consistent answers. We may disagree on something, but to be able to give the RTM, neighborhood association meetings, service clubs, wherever we go, I want us to be able to always have that. And what makes that happen so well for us is when we share our thoughts and our comments and we educate. But the best part of the chairman's report was given to me by Peter Minarski. And Peter Minarski goes, this year's okay, everything's going smooth. Of course, I'm pulling my hair out, but he goes, everything's going smooth. So to get a passing mark from Peter is the best compliment we can get. Thank you for that comment, and that was not staged or anything. So, oh, there's the caveat. So I thought that was, I thought that was pretty interesting. He goes, no, we're okay, we're smooth. A lot of information. He goes, I think he said to Ms. Moriarty and I today in our monthly meeting, he goes, got a lot of big issues, but we'll get through them. So I thought that was pretty good. So that takes us to our meeting minutes. The first minutes are actually from December 16th last year. And as a footnote, Mr. Raymer, you have to sign those when they're, so that.
Because I was chair.
And you did a good job. So those minutes were from a previous term. So, and I'm gonna make Ms. Crumick smile a little bit. Those, I would entertain a motion to accept only. Even though under the new Robert's rules, we're approving them, but that's not from this authorized term, that's from the last term. So I'm just saying we have them. So
Can I make that motion?
you may make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mason. I'd like to make a motion to accept the BET meeting minutes of December 16th, 2019 as amended.
Okay. Second by Mr. Raymer. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstaining? Oh, okay. Yes. Just one. Mm-hmm. You understand why that is? Okay. Thank you. Okay. All those were in favor, that passed 10-01. On the next 2 minutes, those are approval, and I know on your call it says accepted. I was in the third generation with Elaine, and I hope you'll forgive me. So can I get a motion for the organizational minutes of January 6th and for the BET minutes of January 27th? Can I get a motion to approve those?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Thank you. And I want to just say, there's 4 people that really did some incredible work on the minutes and the turnover and everything, and I just want to thank them so much. It's really approved.
To adjourn.
All those in favor?
I second that.
Thank you, everyone.
Mike, I got.